It's strange how one small favor can unravel everything you thought you knew about yourself. When Alex called me, I assumed it was another one of his casual, chaotic favors. Watch his dog, pick up his mail, maybe help him carry furniture. I didn't expect him to ask me to keep an eye on his younger brother during their family's cabin retreat. "You're already going up for the weekend," he said. "Just make sure Noah doesn't get bored or, burn the place down. He needs a break." Noah, the kid, who was never really a kid to me. I'd met him a few times over the years, mostly in passing at parties or when he'd tag along with Alex to campus events. Always a little too quiet. Always watching from the corner of the room with this knowing smile, like he saw more than he let on. I used to think it was just shyness, but lately I've started to wonder if it was something else. Something deliberate. I said yes, of course. How could I not? The cabin was just outside Asheville, tucked into the side of a ridge that still smelled like spring rain even though summer had started creeping in. 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, no Wi-Fi, Alex's idea of unplugging. He was only staying for the first night before heading to his girlfriend's family reunion across the state. That left me and Noah with a long weekend and nowhere to be but here. I told myself it would be simple. I'd read, maybe get some sketches done. I'd been blocked for weeks. Noah would do his own thing. We'd coexist in silence and polite nods. But the moment I saw him step out of Alex's car, that theory started to unravel. He was taller now, less angular, more filled in. Hair damp from the drive, eyes tired but warm. He offered me that same crooked smile, and I felt my stomach tighten in a way I wasn't ready to admit. "Hope you don't mind sharing space," he said, tossing his bag over his shoulder. I call the bedroom with the window. He brushed past me, and his shoulder lightly grazed mine. It was casual, normal, but I felt it long after he disappeared inside, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe Alex hadn't asked me to keep an eye on Noah. Maybe he'd asked Noah to keep an eye on me. I first met Noah when he was 16, all lanky limbs and sarcasm. He hadn't quite learned to temper yet. Alex dragged him to our end-of-semester bonfire, insisting he get out of the house and be around real people. Noah spent most of that night sitting on a log, tearing into everyone's music taste with the deadpan delivery of someone far too observant for his age. I remember laughing more than I probably should have. Back then, I just thought he was Alex's weird, funny brother. Over the years, our paths crossed in quick, quiet bursts, holiday parties, group hikes, one tragically boring camping trip where it rained for 2 straight days, and we ended up playing cards in a leaky tent. Noah always lingered at the edge of things, but I started to notice the way he'd gravitate toward me when he got the chance. A casual, "Hey, what are you reading?" here. A subtle dig at Alex's cooking there. We never spent more than a few hours together at a time, but every encounter chipped away at the wall between us. This weekend, though, there was no wall. Just him, me, and the woods. "I still can't believe Alex bailed," Noah said, voice muffled as he unpacked in the next room. He said this trip was a family tradition, then dipped after one night. "Classic Alex," I replied, stacking firewood near the hearth. "He thinks commitment is a Spotify free trial." That earned a laugh, genuine, low, the kind that settled in my chest longer than I expected. When he emerged from his room, Noah was wearing an oversized sweatshirt, sleeves bunched around his wrists. He plopped down beside me on the old cabin couch like we'd done this 100 times before. His knee bumped mine. He didn't move it. "So, what's your plan for this peaceful escape?" "Gonna sketch trees and brood." "I don't brood," I muttered. "You're literally brooding right now." "Am not." "Broodier, denial is still brooding," he said with a grin, then stole the pencil from behind my ear like he'd done it before. He examined it like it was some kind of artifact. "You still use these?" "Old school." "Some of us like the feel of paper," I said, snatching it back, though our fingers brushed in the handoff. I felt it like static. That night, a storm rolled in unexpectedly, thunder low and heavy, rain drumming against the roof like a pulse. I was halfway through washing dishes when Noah called out, "A minor issue." I dried my hands and walked into the bedroom, hallway to find him standing in the doorway of the smaller guest room, frowning at a sagging, damp mattress. A leak in the ceiling right above the bed. I think the cabin's trying to murder me. Well, it's either that or the couch, I offered. Unless... Noah raised an eyebrow. Unless... You can take my room, I said too quickly. It's dry. Nope, not a chance. You got here first. We can share. My throat tightened. You sure? Come on, he said, flashing that same easy, unreadable smile. It's just a bed. I don't bite. That might have been true, but I wasn't sure I could say the same for my thoughts. Later, in the quiet dark, I lay on one side of the bed, facing the window, aware of every inch between us. He was close, but not touching. I could feel the heat of him in the space where our backs almost met. You still awake? He whispered. I hesitated. Yeah. There was a pause, then, I always liked your sketches. You draw people the way they really are. It was such an unexpected thing to say, soft, earnest, that I didn't know how to respond. So I just lay there, heart thudding, words tangled on my tongue. He didn't say anything else. Just shifted slightly, the mattress dipping under him, closer. Not quite touching, but near enough that I could feel his breath. Sleep didn't come easy after that, but neither did looking away. The next morning started quiet, too quiet, actually. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy with leftover humidity and something else I couldn't name. I found Noah in the kitchen, already making coffee, barefoot, hair a chaotic mess, one of my hoodies hanging off his shoulders. I couldn't find mine, he said when he caught me staring. Borrowed this. Hope you don't mind. I didn't mind. I minded too much. Help yourself, I muttered, pouring myself a cup and trying not to focus on the fact that he was wearing something that still smelled faintly like me. We decided to go for a hike after breakfast. I thought some movement might clear my head, shake off the strange electricity that had been building since last night. We packed light, water, snacks, a small sketchbook I couldn't leave behind. The trail Alex had marked on the cabin map was supposed to loop back in a couple of hours. But of course, nothing with Alex ever went exactly as planned. About 3 miles in, we reached a fork in the path that wasn't on the map. Noah, ever the confident explorer, insisted we go left. Looks more interesting, he said with a shrug. Famous last words. An hour later, the trail vanished into overgrowth, and we realized we were lost. Well, this is character building, I said, trying to sound amused and not mildly panicked. I'm open to the possibility that I suck at directions, Noah admitted, brushing sweat off his forehead. But hey, worst case, we die in the woods and become local ghost legends. Not helping. We backtracked for another half hour before the sky started to shift, gray clouds rolling in fast and low. Then, as if on cue, it started to rain again. Not a drizzle this time, a full-on downpour. We scrambled for cover beneath a mossy rock ledge, just wide enough to crouch beneath. The space was tight, the kind of tight that made breathing feel like a deliberate act. Okay, Noah said, shaking water from his hair. New plan. We wait it out, then find our way back. It's cozy in here, right? He was smiling. Damp and ridiculous. And beautiful. Yeah, I said, voice thinner than I meant. Cozy. We were pressed shoulder to shoulder, the curve of his arm brushing mine each time he shifted. I could feel his warmth through our clothes, hear every shallow breath. There was no room to pretend anymore, not with the silence stretching between us like a live wire. You good? He asked after a beat, voice softer now. I nodded, eyes fixed on a raindrop crawling down the curve of a leaf just outside the ledge. Just thinking. About what? You. Everything I'm not supposed to want. How it's getting harder to pretend I don't. Nothing important, I said. He didn't push, just sat there quietly, letting the rain fill the space instead. But then he shifted again, closer this time, his thigh pressing against mine. Not accidental. Not quite intentional either, somewhere in the space between. You know, he said after another minute, I used to have the biggest crush on you. My breath caught. He said it so casually, like he was talking about a band he used to like or a movie he'd outgrown. You what? I asked, my voice catching on words. He glanced sideways at me, expression unreadable but not unserious. Yeah, when I was like 17, you were the only one who ever talked to me like I wasn't a kid. I thought that meant something. I wanted to say something clever, wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't, because the way he was looking at me now, it didn't feel like something from the past. You say that like it's not still true, I said before I could stop myself. The air shifted between us. Heavy, quiet, charged. He didn't answer, just held my gaze. And in that moment, something cracked inside me. A quiet part of me I'd been holding shut for years started to tremble. I could have kissed him. The thought was there, buzzing behind my ribs like a scream I was afraid to voice. But I didn't, because I was terrified, because Alex was my best friend, because I didn't know what would happen after. But Noah didn't look away. And for the first time, I saw it clear and real. The way his eyes lingered, the way his fingers twitched like he wanted to reach for me, but wasn't sure if he could. The rain kept falling. We didn't move, didn't speak, but something had shifted between us. Irrevocably, quietly, completely. And I knew whatever this was, it wasn't going away. By the time the rain let up, dusk had already settled in. Everything around us glistened with silver light, leaves dripping, the forest steaming as if exhaling after holding its breath. We made our way back in silence, closer now, steps almost in sync. Neither of us mentioned what had been said under the ledge. It clung between us, weightless but heavy, waiting. When the cabin finally came into view, I almost felt disappointed. The quiet wilderness had offered us something we couldn't bring back inside with us. Noah peeled off his damp hoodie and disappeared into the bathroom. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty mug I didn't remember placing on the counter, heart still pacing like I hadn't left the woods at all. I heard the shower running, then the water stopped. I heard his bare feet against the wooden floor. Every small sound felt louder now, more meaningful. He reappeared a few minutes later in clean clothes. Well, mostly mine again, this time a worn flannel and a pair of sweatpants that clung to his hips like they'd always belonged there. His hair was damp, curling slightly, and he looked at me with an unreadable softness that nearly undid me. "You okay?" he asked, voice quiet, like he already knew the answer. I nodded, lied. "I keep thinking about what you said earlier." I blurted, unable to keep it down any longer. "About having a crush on me." He didn't flinch, just leaned against the kitchen counter and met my eyes. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Was that past tense?" He didn't answer at first. His gaze dropped, then returned, steadier this time, more open than I'd ever seen it. "No," he admitted, "it wasn't." The room went still. My mouth was dry. I felt every inch of my skin. "Noah," I started, but he shook his head. "Don't pretend like you don't feel it too," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I see the way you look at me. I always have." My breath caught. "You're Alex's brother," I said, even though it sounded weak the second it left my mouth. "I'm also my own person," he replied, stepping closer. "You don't owe him an explanation for how you feel." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. "I don't know what to do with this," I admitted. "I've spent so long telling myself there was a line I couldn't cross. And now, you're standing on the other side of it." He took another step forward. We were close now, closer than we'd ever been, in every possible way. "There's no line," he said. "There's just fear." I looked up, and his face was so close, I could see the small scar on his chin from when he fell off a bike years ago. I remembered him telling that story at a barbecue once, laughing at himself. Back then, it had been funny. Now, it was intimate. "Why now?" I asked. Noah hesitated. "Because I couldn't wait anymore. Because being near you like this and pretending, it doesn't mean something is exhausting. And because I think you're scared to want something you think you're not allowed to have." I swallowed hard. My heart was loud in my ears. "I am scared," I admitted. "You matter to me. And if I mess this up, you won't." He reached out slowly, cautiously, like he was afraid I might bolt. His hand brushed my wrist. Light, gentle. "A question." "I want you," he said, voice shaking slightly now. "Not just tonight. Not just because we're alone in the woods. I've wanted you for a long time. The weight of his words knocked the breath from me. All the walls I'd built, every excuse, every silent dismissal, started crumbling. I reached for his hand. Our fingers intertwined like they'd done it 1,000 times before. I think I've been wanting you too, I said, and it felt like a confession and a release all at once. I just didn't know what it meant, or if I was allowed to feel it. You are, he whispered. You always were. I took one hesitant step closer. My other hand moved to his jaw, tentative at first. His breath hitched. Our eyes locked. I don't want to pretend anymore, I said, barely able to get the words out. You don't have to. I kissed him. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft, warm, filled with everything we hadn't said for years. His lips parted slightly, and he leaned into me like he'd been waiting for this longer than he wanted to admit. The world faded. There was only the faint scent of pine from the open window, the hum of crickets, and the feel of his body pulling closer. His hands found my waist. Mine slipped behind his neck. We stayed like that for a long moment, neither of us willing to break it. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads touched. This feels like falling, I said, my voice hoarse. Maybe it is, he replied, smiling. But I think I'd like to fall with you. I let out a shaky breath and pulled him into a quiet embrace. His arms wrapped around me easily, grounding me. It didn't feel like the start of something reckless. It felt like finally coming home. We didn't move for a while, just stayed wrapped in each other, our breaths sinking without effort. I could feel the steady thump of his heart where our chests met, and the way he fit against me, like we'd been doing this in secret all along and had only just let the world in on it. Noah pulled back eventually, but only enough to look at me. His smile was lazy, content, like the kind of smile you give someone when you know you're safe with them. So he started, voice soft but tinged with a smirk. Do I still count as your best friend's annoying little brother? I snorted. You were never annoying. Just dangerously charming? I was going to say relentlessly present. Ouch, he said, mock wounded. You kiss a guy once, and he's already getting roasted. You kiss me back? I pointed out, grinning despite myself. True, he said, drawing his thumb gently along my jaw, and I'd do it again, just so we're clear. The flirty lightness was new, and I welcomed it, but beneath it there was still a warmth. Something deeper, something that made my chest ache, but in the best way. We migrated to the couch. After that, bodies still pulled magnetically together. He curled into my side like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I found myself playing with the edge of his sleeve without realizing it. You're quiet, he murmured after a bit. I paused, trying to find the right words. Processing. All of it. Yeah, he said. Me too. A beat passed. Then he said, you don't have to figure everything out right now, you know? I know, I said, but I want to. Or at least try. He looked up at me, serious now. This changes things. Yeah. I don't want to be something you regret, he said, quieter now. If it ever feels like too much, me, Alex, whatever, we can step back. I turned to face him more fully, my hand moving to his cheek. Noah, this doesn't feel like something I'll regret. It feels like something I should have been brave enough to want sooner. He let out a shaky breath, and I felt him relax into me again. That little knot of tension in his shoulders melted under my fingers. So, what happens when we leave here? He asked. I hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of the weight of the question. I guess we talk to Alex eventually. We see where this goes. We figure it out together. Together, he echoed. There was a pause, then that teasing glint came back in his eyes. Think he'll kill you? Or just go for the classic dramatic sigh and walk away? Hard to say. I might get exiled. Well, Noah said, sliding his hand along my arm, if you're banished, I'm coming with you. I laughed. That's comforting. We sat there for a long while, talking about nothing and everything. Favorite songs, old memories, whether the cabin was actually haunted. Noah insisted yes, based on how many times the door creaked on its own. Our hands stayed tangled, legs brushing, The closeness no longer something accidental or forbidden. It was simply ours. At one point, he leaned in and kissed me again, slower this time. Less like discovery, more like promise. And in that quiet, I realized something. This didn't feel like a detour. It felt like the path I hadn't known I was already on. We were still in the middle of nowhere, still drenched in the weight of everything we hadn't yet faced. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't scared. I was exactly where I wanted to be. We woke up tangled on the couch the next morning, limbs thrown over each other like we hadn't wanted the night to end. I was the first to stir, sunlight pooling across the wooden floor and warming my face. I blinked groggily, and the first thing I saw was Noah, curled into me, mouth slightly parted, his hair a chaotic mess. And for a moment, everything felt surreal. Not in the cinematic, too-good-to-be-true way, just quietly unbelievable. Like waking up in a version of my life I didn't think I was allowed to have. I reached out and ran my fingers lightly through his hair. He made a soft noise and shifted, eyes fluttering open. When he saw me, he smiled, slow and sleepy. "Morning," he mumbled, voice scratchy. "Morning." A pause. "You snore," I said, grinning. "I do not." "Like a bear." He shoved me weakly and buried his face in my chest. "You're the worst." Still kissed me. I pointed out, "Yeah, and I'm going to do it again in a minute if you keep talking. Promise?" He looked up at that. And just like that, one look, I felt something tug deep in my chest. This wasn't a moment that would fade when we left the cabin. It was already part of me. I meant what I said last night. I told him, voice quieter now, "I don't want this to be a fluke. I want to try. Really try." Noah studied me, his thumb brushing lightly over my hand. "You're not going to freak out when we're back in real life?" I shook my head. I've spent years playing it safe, hiding from feelings I didn't want to name, but now that I've said it out loud, now that I've felt this, I don't want to go back. A beat. Then softly he said, "Okay, then we try." There was a kind of weight in those 3 words, not pressure, just certainty. He sat up, stretching with a yawn, and looked around. "You think your brother's going to suspect anything if we come back from this trip and I'm suddenly wearing all your clothes? He already suspects you steal my hoodies. He just thinks it's out of laziness." "Well," Noah said, smirking, "let's not correct him yet. We made breakfast together, messy and half-burned, but good in that way food tastes when you're in love or close to it." When we packed up the car later that afternoon, I caught Noah slipping something into his duffel. A small carved piece of wood from the windowsill, just a tiny heart someone had etched years ago. He didn't say anything, but when he saw me watching, he smiled like it was a secret only we shared. The drive back was different. Not just because the roads were drier or because we'd finally figured out how to work the AUX cord, but because every time I looked over at him, legs folded up in the passenger seat, humming along to music, we were both holding back smiles. At a red light, he reached over and took my hand. Just like that. No dramatic gesture. No words. Just his fingers slipping between mine, like they belonged there. And they did. We didn't talk about what we'd tell Alex right away, or how we'd handle the weirdness of it all. That would come later, naturally. But what mattered now was that we were talking, we were holding hands, we were figuring it out, one step at a time. When we pulled into my driveway, Noah leaned across the console and kissed my cheek. "Thanks for helping me out this weekend," he said with a teasing smile. "Real selfless of you." I laughed. "Anytime." He grabbed his bag, paused at the door, and glanced back at me. "Hey, we're good, right?" "Yeah," I said, my chest full, my voice sure. "We're good." And as he walked up the steps to my front door, still wearing my flannel, still smiling like we'd been keeping this secret our whole lives, I realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of the one I'd been too afraid to write. Until now.